Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you all to forum number 7 regarding the Neshoba Regional High School building project. My name, for those of you who do not know me, and there aren't very many people here tonight that don't know my name, but for those of you who don't know, my name is Joseph Gleason. I'm from Lancaster, Massachusetts. I am the chairman of the school building committee and a district committee representative from Lancaster. With me this evening, we have Mr. Craig Olson from Kessel Booz Associates, our architects. Ms. Mary Ann Williams from Skanska USA, our owners project manager. Mr. Joe Milani, also from Kessel Booz Associates, Inc. And last but not least, the gentleman who needs no introduction, but our esteemed superintendent, Mr. Kirk Downing. And I know that I would be remiss, Kirk, if I didn't make comment to this, because it's going to go on the internet. We all need to congratulate Kirk Downing and his Denver roots. Congratulations, Kirk. It only took 56 years for the Nuggets to finally win their first championship, but congratulations. Enjoy the day. Thank you. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this meeting over to, this forum over to Mary Ann Williams from our Owners Project Manager, Skanska USA.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to speak loud. Hopefully it doesn't feel like I'm yelling at you, just given what's happening with the rain. So this is a slide that folks have seen before. We have moved through 3 major submissions with the Mass School Building Authority. We're getting ready to submit on the schematic design. And we anticipate that by November, we'll have the project scope and budget, project funding agreement, which is the contract between the district and the MSBA, assuming that there's a positive outcome for the vote in the 3 communities. It is our understanding, dates haven't been set yet, so these are kind of tentative, approximate dates, but that member communities will be holding town meetings and votes in September 2023. And once, assuming that's approved, we would commence immediately with design development and construction documents and hiring a construction manager. Next slide, please. So you can see in the past couple of weeks, we have reviewed cost estimates and alternates with the school building committee. That was followed by another meeting with the school building committee and school committee to review and approve the budget. And that was approved on May 18th. There's going to be a vote, actually tomorrow, for the school building committee to make a recommendation that the submission be sent to the MSBA no later than June 27th. And after the Mass School Building Authority receives the submission, the process there over the next few weeks is they'll take about 30 days to review the package. In the interim, probably 1 to 3 weeks after the submission, they'll invite the district into what they call a project scope and budget conference, where they will review eligible and ineligible costs and come to an agreement about what will be the final reimbursement number. And when I say final meaning going forward, but we really won't understand the final number until closeout in the audit in 2028, the final audit. But it's going to be pretty darn close and close enough for planning purposes. So next slide, please.
Thank you, Marianne. So what we wanted to do is, since we last met and presented, we presented all of this stuff to the school building committee through every month, but wanted to kind of bring it to a fore of what the project currently includes. So when we're looking at the site plan for reference, here's Route 117 here with Green Road along here. And what we're looking is, here's the rotary that's being designed that will be built, and the main entry would be coming off of that. If you look in the faint here is the existing school, and then so you have your existing athletic stadium here. So the phasing of it would be that we would be building the new building, basically wrapping around and taking over half of that parking lot area here to build this new building. We have the gas easement that we're having to stay south of. And so we anticipate that the tennis courts will be taken over here as well as part of this, just for that. But what we'll have to do is relocate the force main out to the leach fields from the wastewater treatment building. We'll have to do some new wells, probably 2 new wells, one here for potable water, one for a secondary for non-potable, which would be for the sprinkler system, the fire suppression system for the building. One thing to note as you're looking at this is we're looking to maintain a lot of the existing athletic complex, and that is an important element that, as we've talked through this, is trying to be very cost effective with decisions that we've made, is as we'll talk about a little bit later about what are eligible and ineligible elements with the MSBA reimbursement, and site is something they do have a cap on. So we're looking to be as efficient as we can with the site package. So by maintaining the existing athletic complex as much as we can, with the exception of the baseball field and the tennis courts, we're really able to bring that cost down, which then increases the reimbursement, the percentage of reimbursement up. And so in that standpoint, so not only does it not displace the students during their high school careers, we're trying to be sensitive to all the students through their high school career, but also being as efficient as we can with what the actual project costs are. And then one other item just to note is that down here is the project, we're proposing geothermal as the heating and cooling system, and so there'll be a proposed geothermal well field located in this area here. The building, we're going to talk a little bit about the floor plans shortly, but you can see the main entry would be located here, and then so there'd be parking throughout with the new baseball field here. And so from that, I'm going to turn it over to my partner in crime here, Joe, to talk a little about the floor plans.
Thank you. Good evening, Joe Milani with KBA. This is probably version number 10,743 or something like that, where this changes virtually, as I mentioned before, daily, as we refine it, trying to make it more efficient, meet the educational goals of the educational plan. And this is the best we have right now, and this is what's going to MSBA as our schematic design option. Which one? Oh, this is the laser. Yep, okay. So on the first floor, again, using the student commons as a central hub of the building, all the major spaces, the auditorium, the gymnasium, the media center, access to the classroom wing, are all off of this central hub. This was requested to be more of a, hopefully a greener space when we had our visioning sessions. And so we've opened, you'll see one of the resident renderings also, we opened a visual access to the green space on the western side of the site to bring the green into the building. The small learning communities are arranged in two wings of 2 stories with a large open project-based learning space as a central core of the classroom surrounding it. The media center serves as a link basically on both floors between both of the small learning communities, so that students, when passing, going to lunch, going out to other classes stuff, they're always accessing and always having the media center as part of their daily crossing through the school. We've located some of the special education areas, PACE and the Therapeutic Learning Center, as well as some on the second floor right off the back. The driveway, as you might remember from the site plan, runs along this way. And this gives us a direct access where those students may have anxieties entering the building through the regular, with all the other students in the school. This gives them the opportunity to come in on a separate entrance for security and to control their anxiety. Service areas of the building are in the back. This does present a view from Route 117 and the Rotary directly through to the entrance of the building, and the auditorium is on direct access with that. The gym forms as you'll see in some of the renderings, a mass on one end, as does the small learning communities with the science labs on the other end, to sort of frame the entrance. On the second floor, we have the same second story of the small learning communities with the open space for the project-based learning going through. More special education programs, the Bridge program and the Connections program located off of the main circulation path. One of the requests from our personnel meetings with the different teachers and staff was that the special education locations be central to the school and central to the passage of the students, so that it doesn't become stigmatized as being those rooms at the end of the corridor. This is something that is not only visible to all the students at all times of the day, but is accessible to all the students at all times of the day. And students come and go through these programs multiple times during the school year. Again, on the second floor, we have the Student Commons, which is open to the second floor as a large open space, allowing a visual front to the auditorium, second story of the media center. We do have some of the signature programs located on the second floor. The business tech, the graphics, the EMT, and the Black Box TV studio are all part of the district's signature programs. The only item that isn't on the signature programs in this sort of STEM corridor is the Foods Lab, but the Foods Lab is centrally located here so that it's visible to all the students. It has a relationship with the special education areas of the building, and also can serve as a source for catering for events that might happen after hours in the gymnasium, the auditorium, or just student activities that happen in the open collection area here in the circulation space. Next. Oh, I get the next, I'm sorry. Duh. We looked at, and we've shown some of these images before, but we looked at the types of materials that we're using in the school and the forms we're using in the school. We wanted to keep the materials reminiscent of some of the traditional materials used throughout the 3 towns in the district: stone, the timber, and wood, but not necessarily materials that might be less durable or higher maintenance. And we looked at using forms of the building that would be reminiscent of some of the rural forms, barns, and other things around the district that might evoke more comfortable feeling for the students, more home feeling for the school. And so we're using a lot of glass metal wall panel as well as concrete for the metal wall panel, for the concrete wall panels, and sunshades to control, as you'll see, sunshades to control some of the southern exposures in the building to mitigate some of our heat gain throughout in the school. And this is a current rendering as of last week of the school. Again, you can see we're using natural stone veneer as a base to tie the building to the environment. You can see the main entrance coming through from, this is a view from 117 from the Rotary, the main entrance coming through from 117. Above that, in the science labs, we have metal wall panels to provide a look to the future, a look to technology. Glass on the southern face to allow for greenery and visual outside, as well as sunshades to control heat gain. And then slope roofs to provoke a more rural atmosphere on the classroom areas, and also provide a hiding place for the inevitable rooftop units that we have to service the mechanical systems of the school. Oh, I'm sorry, Ken.
I'm not touching the clicker. I'm just going to touch the remote. Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ken Fromer. I've been a resident of Lancaster pretty much all of my life, since kindergarten anyway, and I've been in the construction industry for as long professionally for 25 years now. I'm on the building committee and I'm on the subcommittee where we meet every 2 weeks in Superintendent Downing's office, and we review everything. And kind of part of my job, maybe self-imposed, is to kind of look out for basically all the town's interests, and especially financially, and trying to always push back. And also looking out for what's best for the town and how all 3 towns and how we represent them. And the reason why I've kind of been asked to speak a little bit right now was one of the earlier versions didn't meet the mark of what we were looking for as a committee. It was a lot simpler, a lot rectangular, and didn't really express what the towns, are all about. And what this does, and what this represents to me anyway, and kind of as a historian of old houses and things like that, is a lot of what I see here is how a lot of the especially the larger properties in these towns have developed, where you have images of large barns and separate attached buildings that over, 50 to 100 years have all been, intertwined. And that's kind of the feeling that I get from seeing this. And I want to, commend the architects for the job they've done on doing that. And one of the things also that is very important to me is that can't be expensive. And it shouldn't be an homage to an architect or anything like that, where we're spending way more money than we should. So a lot of the things that everybody's looking at is how can we make this less expensive, and what materials can we use? And that's really the directive that we've given to the design team, and how do they do that? And a lot of the materials fully aren't figured out yet, because materials are constantly changing and developing. So as, whether it's technologies or things like that develop, we can take advantage of that from a cost standpoint. So I think so far where we're at, I'm very pleased. If that means anything to anybody, but it does to me. And I know I'm very happy with where things are, and I'm so glad to see where we're at with the budget as well. Because this building is not, while it looks, it's very nice, it's not expensive. And I think people have to understand that. It's not for what we're building. And I think that that's very important. And it's going to give the students what they need. So.
Yeah, if I could just add, as we were working on it, this is one of many iterations as we went through the process, working on it and really trying to understand. We looked at and explored a lot of buildings around the district of that, and trying to understand them and really understanding the vernacular. Seeing this as kind of a flagship building to all three communities. It's where all the kids come together. Becomes kind of the landmark of bringing all three together. So it was making sure that we made reference to the different communities throughout the building. And as Ken mentioned, it was about a balance of, I think it would make it look nice, but don't make it expensive would be the first one thing. Be sensitive from it. So it's a balance of how much is a solid wall to how much is glass for daylight. So again, when you think about sustainability, there's a balance to that, because when you're letting daylight in, you're not having to have the lights on, which saves electricity, but at the same time, you got to balance out solar heat gain and the greenhouse effect and cooling. So it's looking at all those balances, and that's part of the sustainable aspect that we looked at. And even some of these sloped roofs, while we're using them, and there's actually references to it in the zoning bylaws for the town of Bolton of sloped roofs, and using them to shield rooftop equipment, but we're also using the overhangs to create shading from the sun into the windows, into the classroom. So it's also a balancing of just using things that we know we need to have for the building to our benefit to actually help it from a design and sustainability standpoint. And so as we go along, these are conceptual renderings. We're a schematic design. They're going to evolve over time, but this kind of gives the intent of the direction the building's going in. Where you can see the main entry in the center piece there, with a classrooming on the left, and then the gymnasium on the right. And I'll turn it over to Joe to talk about the inside.
So this is an interior view looking from the back towards the east and then towards the west, out through that green view line that I was mentioning before here, from the cafeteria through the communications node between the classroom wings, and then outside. We wanted to make this as open as we could to bring the view of the greenery into the school, provide view lines from the cafeteria and different locations throughout the school for transparency. And also this becomes not just a corridor. One thing that we've had real issues with over the course of development of these plans is that the link between the cafeteria and the classrooms had just become just a way to get there. Here, this becomes a destination in itself. The small groups can sit here on these steps or on these tables and have small group learning. This can become extensions of the work going on in the cafeteria, or this can actually become a seating area for people coming out of the foods lab and having a small, cafe gathering of some kind. You can see a bridge in the second floor that goes from one small learning community to the other, north to south. really opening up the view to the outside. This is the view of the media center, and stairs going up to the second floor. This originally was a much larger stair. We wanted to make it more monumental, but we find that the view outside and bringing the outside in was much more important than having a monumental stair that really is a way to get from one floor to another. Here you can see the auditorium to the right. The view access coming in the main entrance is directly to the auditorium, and then stairs going up over here that go up to the STEM area on the second floor to provide multiple access points to the second floor and around the building. Okay, we also, the reason they have steps here in these ramps is because the classroom wings on this side are actually recessed down 2 foot 8 inches from the level of the general school, with the cafeterias. Basically a separation between the public area of the school and giving you a physical transformation going into the private area of the school. This also was an economic decision because there is, being a baseball field and a parking lot, there is a lot of unsuitable materials that have to be excavated and replaced by structural fill. And this, dropping this down 2 foot 8 inches relieves some of that load on replacement and cost for replacement of all that fill. So it was both an economic and an aesthetic decision that worked out well for us. Yeah, there you go. This is a view inside one of the small learning communities looking towards outside where the science labs are. The science lab on this side and 2 science labs over here. This is a project-based learning space, collection space for a variety of anywhere from half a class to 3 classes can gather to do group learning, collaborative projects and the like. We provide a stair that connects them both visually and physically so that there's free passage and very open community feeling between the 2 schools, whether this is one grade level and another, whether this is, you know, the blue house and the orange house, whether this is the upper school and this is the lower school. This still provides a feeling of community between the 2 schools. On the second floor, this large open space is also a project-based learning space for the second floor students, and all have a view outside through the large curtain wall at the end to outdoor learning space outside of the science labs that provides, when the weather's nice, to be able to go outside and have an experience outside, either looking at plant life, insects, or just having an outside place to go for reading or teaching. And this is...
Okay. So what you see here is a breakdown of the total project budget. The estimates that we have were 40-plus pages each, and so what we've tried to do is provide this information in a summary in the format that aligns with the Mass School Building Authority's project budget template. So you'll see here, we've broken it out by major categories, where the feasibility study, agreement that there was a budget for the feasibility study for $1.5 million that included feasibility and schematic design. You go over to so you'll see the budget amount and then the estimated amount eligible for reimbursement. So as an example, with the $1.5 million, all of that in the third column on the right is eligible for reimbursement, but that number is an eligible cost, but the reimbursement rate is 53.09%. And so you'll see as we go across and come down, administration, the budget amount for the OPM is $6,891,000 for administration, but you'll see that the eligible amount is $3.6 million. And same thing for architecture and design, $18.6 million, but the eligible amount is $11.9 million. So when you go through each of these categories and you come down to the bottom, you'll see that the total project budget, which is inclusive of design, architecture, the OPM, the construction manager for pre-construction, actual construction, other miscellaneous project costs, FF&E, meaning furniture, fixtures, and equipment, a construction contingency for the owner that funds change orders, and then owner's contingency that funds other items and building permit by the owner. You'll see like a 0 next to the building permit. The Mass School Building Authority will not participate in reimbursement for that. So what you see is out of the total project budget for all categories, everything in soup to nuts, is $241.7 million, but in terms of the Mass School Building Authority's caps, space summaries, categorically, they cap construction at $393 a square foot for reimbursement. You'll see that they'll take that number of $118.9 million, and if you go over to the furthest right-hand column under the green title maximum reimbursement amount, that total amount will be reimbursed for eligible costs at 53.09%. So you'll see that the total maximum reimbursement is $63.1 million. The MSBA has recovery for commissioning costs that are for any ineligible areas of the building, so that the total maximum reimbursement amount is $63 million. So when you come down to the summary, you have a total project budget, $241.7 million. The maximum reimbursement from the Mass School Building Authority, their participation is $63 million, and the district's share is $178 million. If you go to the next slide, that you'll see that the MSBA contributes, but they don't fund the cost of the building or the entire project, but they will participate. And if you go to what they call 963 CMR, it's the School Building Grant Program, and they talk about reimbursement, eligible and ineligible costs. And over in the right-hand corner, and I won't go through all of them, you'll see an example of ineligible costs. They won't pay for legal fees. They won't pay for municipal services, meaning, for example, the building permit. And we can go on. This is available. This information was presented for those who haven't had a chance to review it. It was presented at the public forum, number 6, and is available for folks that want to take a deeper look at this. Next slide, please. So Neshoba's reimbursement information, we've received some questions from the community, some of them same questions but different communities. So we tried to summarize how to answer most of these questions collectively if we can. So Neshoba's base reimbursement rate is 31 points, 31%. And that's true for all schools, school districts that are in the program across the Commonwealth. Then there's an income factor and a property wealth factor and a poverty factor. I mean, the good news is 0 poverty factor here. The bad news is that they're not contributing money towards reimbursement for that category. So you end up with, that's how we arrive at the 49.53%. And these factors, it's information that's provided by the Massachusetts Department of Revenue, depending on the category. It can be provided by the Department of Education, et cetera. So you wind up with the 49.53%. There's additional incentive points that's anticipated, 1.56% for maintenance, meaning you guys have done a great job taking care of your school, because that number could be 0. And the max is 2%. So kudos to the community for doing that. 2% for energy efficient school, and you've heard the terminology LEED. So it's about being an energy efficient school, and they will apply those additional percentages for reimbursement to eligible costs. So Neshoba's total reimbursement is anticipated to be at 53.09%, and Neshoba's anticipated effective reimbursement rate, meaning because some costs are ineligible and others aren't, that you wind up with 26.12%. Now, somebody raised a question, and it's a great question, and it comes up in every project there is. They're looking and they're saying, you know, why is it 53% and yet we're only going to receive an effective rate, reimbursement rate of 26%? So one of the things to think about, I'm going to go out of order here if we can skip forward to the next slide. This little box on the left, somebody specifically asked the question, why was Minuteman able to build their school for so much less money than we're building our school? And the simple answer is that their base rate was 44%, their effective reimbursement rate was 29%, and you might say, well, that's only a 15% differential. Why is ours, you know, a 26.97% differential? Well, the reason is that Minuteman was designed, bid, and built pre-COVID. And since then, there have been market increases. So the visual, I think, is helpful to say, on the bottom is the cost, and on the top is the reimbursement from the Mass School Building Authority. So Craig and I were chatting this afternoon. Oh, I reversed it. Okay, Craig and I were chatting this afternoon, and we said, well, what would it cost today if we were to build the identical school? Well, what we found is the MSBA had a $299 cap, and I know this because we all worked on Minuteman together. There was a $299 cap for reimbursement on a project that was less than $500 a square foot. On the right, if we were to apply today's standards, it would be a $393 reimbursement from the Mass School Building Authority, but schools no longer cost $450 to $650 per square foot. In today's dollars, the school would cost $775. But we're not building the school today. We're still in a design process. And when you look at escalation for building a school, you go to the midpoint of construction. So that's out until December 2026. Okay, so now if you add 4% a year, you know, you keep multiplying it times 1.04, all of a sudden that 775 goes up to $912 a square foot. But the only difference between Minuteman pre-COVID and Minuteman post-COVID is that the construction cost has doubled, but the reimbursement has increased, not double, but a little more, maybe 20%. And so I think it's a good visual. I hope I've communicated it appropriately because it's confusing to talk math, I think. So anyway, if we go back one slide. I know, you're so good, Joe. So when you go over to the right-hand side here, when we talk about reimbursement, there's all kinds of caps that are applied. So you'll see, for example, that there's a site work cost limit. So the MSBA will participate up until $39 a square foot. That's great. But the average site cost on a typical school project is about $78 per square foot. And that's based on, that's based on data provided by the MSBA. You can go on the Mass School Building Authority website and they will show you cost information. They will break down, as we did on the previous slide, categorically all the costs, and you will see over time that the costs have started to go like this. But the reimbursement has started to go, increases have gone like this. So instead of kind of having a little gap, it became a big gap. So looking at the building cost limit per square foot, it's $393. So I misspoke, I said $775, it's $790 right there in today's dollars. But the point we're trying to make is anything above the $393 is 100% cost to the district. Not because this is over-designed. It's a function of what has happened over the last 3 to 5 years. We've had COVID, we've had the Suez Canal, we've had the storms in Texas where they lost their electrical infrastructure. Then we had tornadoes in southern states. We had ships sitting in the docks on the West Coast. You couldn't even get them, the cargo containers off the ships for over a month. And then they didn't have truck drivers. And so, it was like the perfect storm, and it was something that was truly beyond everybody's control. Nobody imagined it. You couldn't make it up. It just happened. So we go down to fixtures, furniture, and equipment. The Mass School Building Authority will reimburse $2,400 per student. Guess what? You probably spend $4,000 to $5,000 per student. That's a standard. You'll see that in every school. Is it because it's excessive? No, it's, you need desks and chairs and all the equipment that goes into running the school. So then you look at other miscellaneous smaller caps. You have the designer and OPM fee cap. There was a time, this is the first project I've worked on, where the Mass School Building Authority didn't pay 100% of it. It's a reflection of what has happened. They can only participate to a certain extent because there's 1,852 K through 12 public schools in Massachusetts, and everybody is competing for those dollars. And if they select only 15 to 25 schools per year out of the 1,800, that's why you hear the stories, geez, this was our 5th try, our 6th try, our 7th try, submitting statements of interest, talking about the deficiencies in their school. And they're thrilled that they're invited into the program, but they try to spread the money around across the state and have it be equitable. So construction and owners contingencies. It's important to carry a contingency. We do, one question that came up where somebody said, or asked, are we gonna see 10 to 20% change orders on this project? No, you're not. And if you do, you should fire all of us. You too, right? Because the standard is the Mass School Building Authority, I scared you, Joe, sorry. No. The Mass School Building Authority reimburses up to 1% on change orders, not because they think you're only gonna have 1%, okay? But they want you to carry somewhere between 1 and 2.5% depending on the size of the project and complexity, okay? And so we expect that there's change orders. If we paid the design team to develop what you would call 100% perfect design, I think we'd all be retired by the time they finished. And so there's an assumption that they're bringing it, to a standard of care, but it's not gonna be perfect, and there will be things that will change. So the change orders are expected, but they're not expected to be excessive. And what we see more is really when a district wants to say, this wasn't part of the original scope, but we want to add this. And so those are owner change orders, not change orders that are due to poor design or lack of a completed design. So again, any square footage in excess of the MSBA guidelines, they have a space summary guideline. And we were looking at this today. If I told you that out of the 209,529 square feet, okay, that only 4% of it is ineligible. Think about that. So all the other spaces qualify for reimbursement based upon the MSBA guidelines and all the different formulas and caps they have. And even with that, you still end up with your effective reimbursement rate of 26.12%. And the point I'm trying to drive home here is that if we didn't go through what we went through in the last several years with issues with the supply chain and COVID and labor shortages and things like that, that, and if schools were being built for $500 a square foot, you would have a very different effective reimbursement rate. Next slide, please. So this is right off the Mass School Building Authority website, and I'm going to try and talk a little louder, but you can see across all these projects, high school projects, you've got, Wakefield High School, Stoneham High School, I'm not going to read them all to you, but if you look at their base reimbursement rate, and then you look at their effective reimbursement rate, the average is a 28.81% differential. Neshoba only has a 26.97% differential. And I say only, meaning we're below average. We're not above average. We're not, if you look at the difference on some of these, it's 30% or better. So there's been a very conscious effort about looking at the spaces, trying to maximize the reimbursement that's available to the district and being smart. But you can't build a school and say, I'm only going to follow the guidelines, because the MSBA, yes, they want you to use it as a guideline, but they want your educational plan to be the basis of design. And so, for example, you have an EMT program. If that was to be eliminated because maybe it's not considered a reimbursable program, and we may be able to make an argument for that when we meet with them for the Project Scope and Budget Conference. The point I'm trying to make is this is about supporting your educational program, and that is the expectation from the state, that you do that. Next slide. I'm going to turn this over to Kirk. Okay.
So I'm Kirk Downing, Superintendent here at Neshoba Regional School District. I want to talk a little bit and pick up from where Ms. Williams talked about the cost of this project. So the impact to the taxpayers is $78 million. I'm going to bring everybody back to last fall, two important meetings that we had. The second public forum was the existing conditions forum, and the third public forum was when we were looking at options for submission for the PSR. The option that was chosen for any design of a building, this was the most affordable option chosen. And the other option was repairing the building, and repairing the building, the MSBA will not participate. If we were just to repair the building and get it into the condition we needed to get it into, according to what we've examined through existing conditions, that would be a $130 million project. And we would still be at risk of losing our accreditation with NEASC because it will not have solved the educational issues brought up in their last report around those matters. So this option that ultimately was chosen is the most affordable option today for us. So when we think of what the impact to taxpayers being $178 million, we share that amongst 3 towns. And the way that we share that is defined in the regional agreement. Mr. Boyle, select member from the town of Bolton, was a part of that committee. And if you recall, when we're looking at high school debt, that's based off of head count of enrollment at Neshoba Regional High School. There's 2 projects that are currently from our past that are assessed every year right now. One is the very room we're sitting in. This area of the building was built in 1998. The other is the athletic facilities outside, which both will be coming off the books in the next couple of years. The same methodology was used to fund those projects. The number here on the screen are FY24 enrollment numbers. At Neshoba Regional High School, approximately 35%. And I'll wander over here. There we go, is that, I'm am not going to move. So, the town of Stowe is approximately 35. Let me try the other one. There we go. I think we're better. Nikki, any help? I would dance for you, but I'm a terrible dancer. Check, 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 check. I think that's better. It's getting better, Nikki. Okay, so town of Stowe is a Yeah, we're being patient here because the sound for our audience out in virtual land is connected to these microphones. So while I could talk to everybody in the audience right now, and as I wander around, I'll do my best. Phil Donahue. Okay, maybe this is a better location. Yeah, we're tied to the outside world. Is it coming across the speakers now? A little louder, Nikki. No, I'm okay. Are we hearing it in the speakers? Okay, so coming back to this point, our FY enrollment, our enrollment in FY24 at Neshoba Regional High School was approximately 35% for town of Stowe, approximately 32% for the town of Bolton, and 33% for the town of Lancaster. And of course, so historically, we have always landed around a third of our towns. So if you take that 178 number and break that down to thirds, you can see the impact to each town would be somewhere in the $56 to $60 million range. And so to the next slide. So as we think about this, there's going to be things happening along the way to make sure that we being responsible in how we bring these items forward to our town. In the summer, on August 2nd, our school committee is scheduling a meeting. That is the meeting where they will vote to incur debt. By regulations in Mass General Law, once the school committee were to vote the debt, they have 7 days to notify the chair of the select boards in our 3 towns, at which time the chair, through the town administrator, has 60 days to host a town meeting where the voters either affirm the school committee's vote or not. And that has to happen it was a slide earlier in the evening, that has to happen by October 4th. I know working with the town administrators, they are going to be working with their select boards because the select boards are the ones that set the dates. The estimated dates right now would be approximately September 18th for the town meeting votes. Assuming a passing of those votes, you still have to demonstrate that you can raise the funds, and that's where the debt exclusion elections would be happening a week later, approximately September 25th. So that's how the funding strategy would be there, and a process would be there. In terms of the strategy, the school district is forming a bond advisory subcommittee, working with our bond counsel and our financial advisors. We're going to be working with representatives from all 3 towns to gather the information from them on market conditions and how this the bond can be constructed in the most affordable way given the economic conditions of the day. So we're engaging with our member towns on that strategy. We're going to be reviewing it with our school building committee as well. And then we're going to be providing the towns with that information once we land on the strategies, because each individual town has a different financial base that they're working from in terms of their ability to pay on the bond. And so the price per household, $100,000 on the value of your home, is going to look different in all 3 towns. And that's a function of the financial structure of the 3 towns and the management of their finances. So today, I can't tell you like that age-old question of how many cups of coffee a day is this building going to cost? That is going to be produced once we develop our strategy, give that to towns, and our town assessors can work on what the impact of that administrators and select boards. So that is coming. That work is going to be done in plenty of time for ultimately the town meeting and elections that will be happening in September. Next slide. So as we wrap up in this project, I think it's important to note that what we have in front of us today is we have the need. We've demonstrated the need and the demand for a new school building. And we've been signaled that we have to address these things in our educational program, because as in the 2016 NEASC report that we got, we're at risk of being cited for our accreditation due to the educational spaces in the building. One major factor we cannot change about this building is the classroom sizes in here. The standard classroom sizes are approximately 720 square feet. MSBA reimburses and expects us to build classrooms at 850 square feet. Thank you, Mr. Olson. We can't change that fact because our walls are built of cement brick. So we can't even change the floor plan of this school through a redesign. That factor alone puts us at risk. Even if we did a remodel of the school, fix the problems of the school, we're not going to solve the issues that come along with accreditation. And we know that when we lose accreditation to our high school, that has an impact on our towns and our attractiveness of our school system to folks who would come into town. So these are all factors that we look at, and we put them out there for you as those considerations, because the fact of the matter is this is just the cost of the project. And as Mr. Frommer spoke earlier about the project, expensive is a relative term. I think what I would say about this project is it's being responsibly designed to give us a cost-effective building that meets a 50-year solution that this community needs. And you can go cheap on a project. You can go cheap on building a house. Question is, how long do you want your house to stand? How long do you want your next school to stand? And if we're going to build a 50-year solution that is responsible, we need to think about what that is going forward with this project. So these are going to be the things we'll have more conversation about, and what we'll be presenting. I know there will be another public forum, Ms. Williams, in September prior to the town meetings. And Ms. Williams, remind me of the date. September 11th will be the date where we have another public forum that gets into all that detail, the cup of coffee analogies, and those types of things. So people prior to going to their town meetings and ultimately to vote have every bit of detail and have clear understanding on what the impact is going to be when we get to decision day. But we're not at decision day today. We're at a place to say, this is where we are in the process. This is what it looks like, and this is the forecast of the costs. So I thank you all for coming into attendance tonight. I thank you all out in Cyberland that have joined us on the internet. We're going to pause now, and I think have an opportunity to take some questions. And Dr. Boynton, our high school principal, is going to facilitate questions that she received online. For those of you that submitted a question to us, we've been tracking those questions throughout today's meeting, and Dr. Boynton is only going to present the questions that may have not been answered in the presentation. So if you submitted a question and it was answered in the presentation, we will not be asking that question again. So why don't we start with one of the questions you might have, Dr. Boynton, and then that'll get us started, and we'll come to the audience.
Will do. Test. There we go. Question from Scott Waterhouse. How often and when does the MSBA change the building cost rates, and would any updates apply to this project?
It's reviewed annually by the Mass School Building Authority Board of Directors, and the most recent increase is the increase that would apply to this project. It went from I believe it was $363 to $393 square foot cap. December of 2022, and some other.
Yeah, so generally speaking, is the way that the process works is for 10 years, they didn't increase their reimbursement rate. 10 plus years probably, I can't remember the exact number. And in the past couple of years, they've increased it from $299 to $363 and up to $393. What happens is once you sign your project funding agreement that Marianne talked about earlier, that's when you lock in your reimbursement rate. So even to a standpoint of just trying to be forthcoming with everybody, is even if they did increase the reimbursement rate, say 2 years down the road, the district wouldn't recognize that current rate. It's whatever you locked in at when you did your project funding agreement. So that's just how their process works. So they recognize the cost increase as was shown by Marianne's here, which is why they did increase it, but it doesn't cover the gap anyways. But that's just the reality of how that of locking at a certain reimbursement rate. So it's probably going to be the 393.
It will be the 393.
Question on construction and sustainability. What was the rationale for choosing LEEDs over CHIPS for the new high school?
So what those are benchmarking system programs. So if you LEED is the most common one people hear of. It's from the U.S. Green Building Council. And that's leadership in energy and environmental design, I believe. And CHIPS, when you hear CHIPS, is Collaborative for High Performance Schools. They're both benchmarking programs that are both great programs. The MSBA recognizes them as your two choices of benchmarking to get that additional 2% reimbursement. The reason we recommend and are using LEED for this project is LEED, they each have their focuses and goals. LEED focuses more on energy and sustainability from an energy standpoint. So that, and it's a more recognized benchmarking program. So it gives us more accurate data and everything to make it a better way of achieving that 2% for the district. So it's a twofold from a life cycle standpoint when you're thinking about it from a sustainability and energy of your energy bills through the life of the 50-year building, as well as then just the quality of the benchmarking program to be able to report that data accurately.
Do we have any questions from the audience here? Let's take a couple of live questions, if you don't mind.
Great, thank you. I have a couple questions. The first question is, what's the plan for housing and students during construction when you demolish the building? And is that built into your cost?
So the students are going to they attend the school full-time in the building you're sitting in through the full construction process. Yeah. So if we can go to that slide earlier, I think it was the second or third. I'll give you a little perspective to show that. That's part of the restrictions of the site. So if you look on this site, Craig, can you go one more, because I think it showed forward. Okay, so if you look at this slide here, where you see the existing building, at the top of the existing building there, that's the library. So if you're standing in the library looking out the windows to the field, you're going to be looking at the wall of the gymnasium that will ultimately be built. Until that's right.
Second question is a tough one for anyone in finance. What's plan B if you don't get approval from the three towns what do you do? You've come up with a great plan and you're expecting it's going to pass. You're expecting that the state's going to maximum reimbursement. If it doesn't pass in three towns, what do you do?
Thank you for that. The question was, if it doesn't pass, what do we do? Well, there's a couple of processes. There are some appeals processes that we can work through the detail with the MSBA but we'd have to demonstrate a rationale for why our vote failed and what our efforts are going to be to then pass it. These are some things that the Minuteman project had to do. Ultimately, what I would tell you is if the project fails and we just can't fund it, we are at risk and virtually certain to lose the accreditation of our high school. And at which point, when we lose the accreditation of our high school, that's when we begin to see the impact of property values in our towns and what the future for our towns would look like. Because, you know, one of the things, we know we're proud of our school system here, and we don't want to be a community that is not accredited in terms of its high school. I do know there's a historical precedent with this with Maynard High School. So I reached out to that superintendent. He wasn't here at that time, but certainly was able to do some research on when they went through the accreditation process, and they did fail to build the building, and their accreditation thus being pulled away, the community came back. They ended up building a more expensive building after that. And now, and back to their full accreditation processes, but there are those impacts that would ultimately happen. And it doesn't solve the problems of this building today. Like I said, just to repair and fix the problems in this building is a $130 million cost, as opposed to the $178 million it would cost to participate in the MSBA process with a new build.
Hi. We used to live in the town of Harvard, and they had a major project when our son was in senior in high school. Of course, it was the SBAB back then. They definitely reimbursed quite a bit for an addition. And I'm thinking, if it fails, would it be feasible to, say, keep your gym, your auditorium, do a just whole different design? And I know you guys have worked very hard, and I'd be very sorry if you had to start from scratch, but in fact, take part of the building down, fix this classroom wings, the labs, I'm sure need updating, roof, whatever, you know, I don't know exactly what your thing is, but would that be a plan B?
Ms. Williams?
That could be a plan B, and I don't want to shoot it down without having a more thoughtful conversation about it. But when we did the feasibility study, we also did look at a renovation addition project. And we found that, again, to the issues of accreditation, of not having appropriate sized square foot classrooms, et cetera, there's a risk there. But the process with the MSBA, let's assume a failed vote. The process with the MSBA is to say, we think we're going to change our preferred solution. And so the first thing they would say is, okay, then you need to do another feasibility study on your own nickel, no reimbursement from the MSBA. Figure out what your preferred solution is. They won't reimburse for that either. Come up with your schematic design. They've already paid for it. They're not going to pay for any of this twice. So that $1.5 million investment over the last 2 years would evaporate, and you would have to come up with that money. Then whatever your solution is, fast forward in time, 2 years from now, that you're assuming the MSBA will let you remain in the pipeline. Okay, you're a minimum of at least maybe 2 to 3 years out, and then we're going to look at how does that translate into adding escalation to your budget to the midpoint of construction, where we were at December 2026. Now we're talking about 2029, 2030. Where are prices then? And did this become a diminishing return doing that again?
I think Mr. Frommer and I both have something to add here. I'll add a quick piece and just give you a resource as well. A public forum 3 were the options when we discussed the options. Yeah, and when we discussed the options, one of the options was the ad rental option. And in looking at all those options, the ad rental option was actually expensive option. And one of the reasons why in that ad rent takes a lot more time, if I recall, the actual physical shovel in the ground till you walk in the door process of a new build would be approximately 3 years, as opposed to an ad reno would take us somewhere around 6 years, if I remember that correctly. So those processes with costs also have impact. So it was at that point we determined that the ad reno really wasn't an option either. Mr. Frommer.
You stole my thunder. All right. That's why you went first. No, I think one thing, that I've been part of the committee for this whole time, and we looked at all these different options, and it was important to me as one of the members of the community to make sure we're looking at all those different options and what is what is the most bang for our buck and what's the most cost-effective solution. And we looked at all those different options of renovation, and it just they cost more and they take longer. Anybody who's renovated their house knows that. And there's also a huge disruption. When we talked about this, there's going to be disruption, but the kids are still in this school for the whole time versus having to be in temporary classrooms and things like that, which are not reimbursable. So we looked at all those things, and that's why we narrowed these down to a few different options and then ultimately decided on this option as being basically the best bang for the buck.
Okay, Mr. Boyle, can we take one from online, and then we're going to come to Mr. Boyle?
Why is the permit fee cost over $2 million?
Because the school would be built in the town of Bolton, and the fee is 1.35% per $1,000. And if you do the math, it's $2,269,000. There was a conversation about raising the awareness that if something could be done to create some relief, certainly that would be beneficial to the project. And but that's outside of what we do here. That's something that has to happen, I believe, with the select board.
I want to state for the record that was not a setup question for Mr. Boyle at all. So I'm happy to take another question from the audience and come back to you if you wish.
Will windows letting in natural light really save electricity?
Yes. No, so yeah, the reason it will is because of the sustainability things, and that will lead into actually I have a few questions that we received that I'm going to tie into this is as we look at the life cycle cost of the building and the sustainability and energy use of it, bringing in daylight is a very important thing, not only for our circadian rhythm when we think about kids learning and staying active and active minds, but we also put what they call daylight harvesting systems in the building. And they're sensors that are actually measuring how much light's coming in from the outside, and it's dimming the lights in the classrooms and within the building. And so when you reduce the light load of the lights, it reduces electrical load, which then saves the energy. So putting those systems in, the various sensors, which we want to say, number one, they're really great, and it's something that we do. We're actually required to do it by building code, by the energy code. So it's something that is just required to do it. But what it does is, so that is having that balance of the amount of windows and the amount of daylight in to be able to reduce that electrical load down through those daylight sensors. And so we have a couple other questions that I want to tie into that, because there was a few questions related to sustainability and as far as what incentives are being explored for the school. As part of our design team, we do have a sustainability consultant, and that's what they do for a living, is work with us as the designers and the engineers to maximize whatever we do from a design to provide as many incentives to the district, whether that be through the Mass Save program or potential rebates, et cetera. And so that's something that they're going to be part of it as part of the team as we develop and maximizing. So even those, when we talk about those, the budget that we're talking about doesn't include those incentives because we can't plan for those. Those would be additional monies that could potentially reduce the cost down the road, but we can't build those into the budget when we're establishing a budget. So there are potential incentives that we anticipate. Those aren't finalized yet, but we can't factor those into the budget as when we actually look at the numbers. And then there's just another question related to PV and solar, photovoltaic solar. And so the building is designed to be able to have photovoltaics across the roof for that, as well as we've been working and talking with some solar companies as far as a power purchase agreement potential for the district, because that gives the district the most bang for their buck versus having to go into the power industry themselves. That's what you see with a lot of districts around here, where you see them putting solar on the roofs or in the parking lots. Those are done through PPAs, power purchase agreements. And so we've been working with them is to maximizing the ability for, as part of that PPA, as we build the infrastructure of the building and design for it. So I just want to kind of hit some of those questions as part of it. So,
Mr. Boyle, your question.
First of all, thanks. This was helpful. My question is just about the 53.09. Does that also get locked in, or is that subject to change? I thought it was helpful how you showed the elements of it, but could that change during the course of the project? Okay.
Okay, it's 53.09% reimbursement eligible costs. So that if you had change orders and they were deemed eligible, that would be the rate that would apply. And if it's ineligible, there would be no application of reimbursement.
I think Dr. Boynton has one more question here.
Just one more. Will the new secondary well also require a new water tank, and where will it be located?
There's a new secondary well, and that's for, it's actually not a secondary well. There are two wells. They're both primary. One is for the non-potable water for irrigation and for fire protection. The other is for potable water for use in the building for drinking and cooking and whatever. Right now there is one well that fills two separate tanks, a 44,000 gallon tank and I think a 4,000 gallon tank. Am I right? Those two tanks are going to remain in place. We are replacing the pumps that service those. The fire pump, it's called a fire pump, and it pumps water. That goes from the storage tank going to the fire protection system, and the pipeline going to the building will all be replaced, as will the domestic water pump that also services water for domestic use in the building. But there are two new wells going in right now to utilize the existing well, which is inside the building. It would wind up in the middle of the baseball field, and you don't want to have a wellhead in the middle of the baseball field. So rather than utilize a well that's been in place for 50 years, we felt that it was more equitable and forward-looking to have two new wells that would service both the potable and non-potable separately.
Thank you. We have answered our online questions, so for our audience.
Thank you. I apologize. I came in to cover this. I apologize. The new footprint, it looks like it's going to be over the current student parking lot and athletic fields. So I'm just wondering how that's going to impact the current students.
Good question. So parking and traffic patterns during construction, is that Mr. Olson?
yeah, I can talk to that one. I'll bring it up. You're right. We are building on the baseball field and about half of the parking lot that you see over here. So the project is utilizing the CM at risk pathway, which means we're going to bring our construction manager on board as the project moves forward. What they'll work with us is phasing, and so in establishing that is as we work, we'll have to figure out how many parking spots that we're going to have to build as temporary parking, for instance, to make sure that any parking that we displace from here that we can replicate, whether it's with a temporary parking lot, so that a matter of the baseball field, that was part of one of the big things we focus on is not taking out a lot of the athletic complex. For that reason, so the baseball field had the least impact of everything as we looked at it. So the district is aware of it. They've been talking about it and making plans for how to house the baseball team during construction.
Thank you. And looking to our audience, if there are any other questions. I think at this point, I'm going to return the microphone to the chair of our committee, Attorney Joe Gleason, to close our meeting.
Thank you, Superintendent Downing. I just want to make a couple of quick comments about the building committee and what you've seen here tonight. First and foremost, as was presented earlier, the building committee is going to be meeting tomorrow night we're going to be voting on a recommendation to send to the district committee on the schematic design. The building committee will then be meeting in joint session with the school committee at 7 o'clock or thereabouts tomorrow night to finalize that vote, after which June 27th is the deadline for submission of both the project budget and the schematic design. So the most significant date after June 27th will be August 2nd, at which point the district committee will be voting on a debt exclusion vote, after which it's in the hands of the voters. The only other thing I wanted to just comment on, and I think that Ms. Williams was very diplomatic in her presentation, but if you go back and look at that permitting fee from the town of Bolton, my assessment, and I apologize, Mr. Boyle, I was not able to make that meeting. I had a prior engagement that evening. Otherwise, I would have been there. But the permitting fee, my assessment or my take from the select board was that they're taking that matter under advisement. It's within their discretion to waive some or all of those fees. I don't believe that the town of Bolton would or should waive all of those fees, but I do believe that they're taking at least the matter of some type of relief into consideration. At least that was the take I took from the meeting, as well as my conversation with the chair of the select board in Bolton. So with that in mind, I have nothing further to add, and I want to thank everybody for coming out. I know it was a little rainy this evening, and I hope that we've been informative, and hope we'll have your support in September. Thank you very much.